lionized mindset. It is said that performance and performance alone dictates the predator in any food chain. Therefore, a lionized mindset strives to be self-initiated, dynamic, cool under pressure, as well as stylish and debonair. So sit back as I roll out the red carpet, detailing and lacing you up through a series of 7 videos explaining 7 mental laws on establishing a foundation on attaining a lionized mindset. My name is Neil K. Marcellus. Welcome to another episode of the Chronicles of Gameology, where the concept of game is understood both as a science as well as an art. Now that's checkmate. To begin with, let me start by paraphrasing something that Albert Einstein, the famous physicist, said that sets the tone for this particular show, which is, by the way, the second law on lionizing your mindset out of a series of 7. But back to that quote, it goes something like this. Contemplation and our thoughts are the organizing factors that throw their weight around upon the chessboard of life, brought together by the spark of causality and the consequences that follow. This quote sheds light on the key principle embedded within gameology, which it is a system geared towards giving an individual mind over circumstances type of abilities. Understanding causality, which this quote mentioned, is essential in understanding or gaining that mind over circumstances type of philosophy I just mentioned. As some of you already realize by watching several episodes of this channel, I use the tenets of the game of chess to show similarities to the tenets embedded within the concept of game and gameology, because both systems requires mental dexterity, and mental dexterity is a very broad category. Within this particular category is a segment referred to as pattern recognition, and this sets the tone for our second law for this particular show. This image that I'm showing you is of a chessboard, and the lighter shade queen, indicated by the red arrow, the beginning of the red arrow, points to putting the darker shade king in check, which is the objective within the game of chess. Understanding this causality, understanding the constants and variables that you're able to recognize so you can forecast the consequences. This is the essence of having pattern recognition capabilities. As you play the game of chess, positions constantly repeat themselves, and you will develop this inventory of experience. For instance, you might see your opponent's knight a couple of moves away from threatening your king, and your queen also, because she is nearby on the same colored square. Understanding these constants and variables in chess of where your pieces sit, what color square they're sitting on, has to do with these constants and variables that gives you this mental power of pattern recognition, that gives you the ability to forecast. This scenario I just painted, you being a aficionado when it comes to the game of chess, this sets off alarms within your instinctive recognition of when things is about to take place, and you understand that this particular move that this opponent with his knight is setting up might be a fork. A fork is a tactic within chess that takes advantage of a vulnerability. This ability to have this pattern recognition is understanding causality and how causality has a domino effect. And this domino effect will be explained later within the show. But it speaks to connecting the dots and understanding this pattern recognition. So understanding this scenario of this tactic, you instinctively look for a different color square in order to move your king to, and the threat disappears. This ability to understand how pattern recognition materializes gives you the ability to recognize this same principle in other factors, in other scenarios. One of the scenarios I like to point out is combat sports, because combat sports, boxing, wrestling, etc., is geared towards functionality. Within judo is a vertical grappling art, also a horizontal grappling art like Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But within judo, there's a particular move referred to as Oshotogari. Basically what it is when the practitioner does a backwards throw on their opponent and rips their outside leg from up under them. As you look at this particular clip, you can see this practitioner setting their opponent up because they understand causality. They have an understanding on how to forecast certain things before they start materializing. This capability of understanding is you develop within the game of chess and also within the game and gameology itself. Because this gives you the ability in order to forecast the probabilities of how things would turn out versus just waiting around and hoping you catch the right bus. As I was taught on the concrete universities within the street, a practitioner must consistently make correlations between two so-called unrelated fields of study, because this is the ability to upgrade this mental dexterity, the ability to use pattern recognition. And I emphasize the word so-called because within two different fields of study, this gives you insight and lets you know when. And this is the reason why the practitioner begins to develop a Jedi type mind capability, because when game recognize game, basically what the practitioner has done is connect and draw similarities between two unrelated subject matters. This also raises the practitioner up in rank within the categories of gameology, because gameology has 7 levels to it. When you look at a chessboard, it's not ironic that the pawn, when it starts its journey and arrives in the backyard of the opponent, so to speak, it moves through 7 color squares. In reaching that backyard, or the opposite end of the chessboard, it's then qualified to be promoted to a powerful queen. This number 7 has a great significance when it comes to the philosophy of gameology. Also, this number 7, I will show you how to utilize this number in lionizing your mind later within the show. Still yet, let me address the main topic of this episode, which is the domino effect. The domino effect can be viewed as points that connect your choices and consequences. You can think of choices and consequences as being cause and effects. Choices can be equated to causality, which gives insight into pattern recognition, which is this domino effect I'm speaking of. The most important application of this domino effect is this: thoughts are causes and conditions are effects. Your thoughts are the spark that initiate causes that results into conditions and outcomes within your life. Everything in your experience has begun with a thought of some kind, either constructed from you or you accept it from someone else, regardless if you vet it or not. The main tenet of becoming a gameologist has always been pushed from this channel as mind over circumstances. In attaining mind over circumstances, a practitioner must be equipped in order to control their thoughts. But before I continue, let me acquaint you with a side-swiping factor that can disable you in utilizing this domino effect. Simply put, within your psychology, you have 7 senses, not 5. I have a second book that's due out by the summer of this year. The name of the book is Sauceology. It's dealing with the art of verbal chess. Within this book, I explain 7 senses and how these particular senses act as windows that provide the avenue for data to reach you so you can analyze and make heads or tails out of it, pertaining to the environment that you are maneuvering in. This side-swiping factor I just mentioned is one of these 7 senses. Let me turn you on to a phenomenon that you might not be familiar with. As you've been listening to this particular show, there has been an internal voice that has provided verbal descriptions of the points of references between the data that you've been digesting. It voices your thoughts as they occur, and also it gives names and titles to categories and points of references within the data that you've been taking in. When your attention is focused, this inner dialogue will naturally pertain and morph itself to the subject matter. But on the opposite end of the spectrum, when you are unfocused, this inner voice, this inner dialogue becomes mental chatter. This side-swiping factor that I mentioned is this mental chatter, which is part of your 7 senses. Now, this mental chatter is not a negative thing. No, but like everything else, if it's not disciplined, then it becomes a liability instead of an asset. Earlier, I spoke about the significance of the number 7 and how I will utilize or show you how to use that number to help lionize your mind. There's this technique referred to as the countdown method, and this helps in order to tone down this mental chatter when you engage into pattern recognition. Basically, you can use this as a pre-exercise in order to make sure that your mind becomes disciplined. It's like working out on a heavy bag. And before you get into a ring, you want to make sure that your punching power and your combinations is tight. So this particular technique can work in utilizing how to tone down, or utilize in helping you tone down this mental chatter. This countdown method works like this. You would take the number 200 and you would take the number 7 and you would subtract 7 from that 200, which basically would get you to 193. Then basically you would turn around and do the same thing and subtract 7 from 193, which would get you to 186. You continue that process until your mental chatter has been toned down. And to challenge yourself further, you can start at an odd number like 178 and just do the exercise from there. You don't have to start at a round number like 200. But as you get more efficient with this technique, you can improvise, so to speak. The reason why I use the number 7 instead of a other number like a even number is because 7 is an odd number, and it challenges you more in order to utilize this technique. When you use this technique, it engages your mathematical portion of your mind. By the way, both sides of your mind produces a form of mathematics, but that's totally different and another show. But basically what this technique does, it causes you to engage this particular aspect of your mind, and it quiets this unnecessary chatter that takes place within this particular sense. In conclusion, you most likely is coming to the realization that it's more beneficial for a gameologist to be the cause of an effect, rather than just sitting around passively accepting to be the effect that was the cause. Now, that's checkmate. In explaining the definition and the application of the second law, now that's checkmate. Thanks for watching. We'll catch you on the next episode.